The morning air bit deep into Jack Wilson's skin as he pedaled his rusty bicycle toward the gleaming skyscraper of Meridian Enterprises. 44 floors of glass and steel towered above the bustling downtown streets of Chicago, catching the early sunlight like a beacon of success. His worn leather shoes pushed desperately against pedals that squeaked with each rotation. The navy suit that had once been his pride now hung from his frame, frayed at the cuffs and torn at the knee from a fall last week. He didn't mind. The worn messenger bag across his chest contained everything he needed: a simple notebook, a pen, and papers confirming his majority ownership of Meridian Enterprises. After 15 years of building companies from nothing, selling them, and disappearing before anyone could photograph his success, Jack had decided on a different approach. Today wasn't just his first day as CEO. It was a test of character, not his, but everyone else's. As the towering glass building came into view, Jack took a deep breath. He wasn't nervous about running a billion-dollar company. He was concerned about what he might discover about the people inside. A group of employees in crisp suits and designer dresses huddled near the entrance, sipping premium coffee and comparing weekend stories. They fell silent as Jack approached, chaining his bicycle to a nearby rack. Their eyes followed him, narrowing with judgment. "Did someone lose a bet?" A woman in a red blazer whispered, just loud enough for Jack to hear. Laughter rippled through the group. Jack kept his head down, shoulders slightly hunched, a posture he'd perfected when he was truly nobody, sleeping in his car between investor meetings for his first startup. He'd learned then how invisible you become when people think you have nothing to offer. As he walked toward the revolving doors, he caught snippets of their conversation. Probably maintenance. Or lost. Should we tell security? Jack pushed through the doors, feeling the artificial warmth of the lobby wash over him. The marble floors gleamed beneath the chandelier light. A security guard looked up, eyes narrowing with suspicion. No one recognized him. No one had ever seen his face. And that was exactly how Jack had planned it. The receptionist's smile was practiced, professional, and completely insincere. Her eyes flicked over Jack's appearance, registering every detail of his worn clothing. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she doubted she could. Before Jack could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced down, quickly typing a response, her red nails clicking against the screen. Jack stood patiently, watching as she finished her message and looked back up with mild irritation. "I'm here for the CEO position," he said quietly. The receptionist blinked, then let out a small laugh. "I think you might have the wrong building, sir. This is Meridian Enterprises." She emphasized the company name as if speaking to a child. Behind her polished desk, Jack noticed her discreetly taking a photo of him with her phone. Seconds later, her screen lit up with message notifications. The office group chat was already buzzing. "The board meeting is at 11, Jack continued calmly. "5th floor, correct?" Her smile faltered slightly. "That's correct. But it's a closed meeting. I can't allow unauthorized." Jack settled into a chair in the waiting area, feeling dozens of eyes on him through the glass walls of surrounding offices. The leather portfolio he carried contained his identification, ownership papers, and the restructuring plan he'd spent months developing. From his corner, he observed the company culture in real time, employees pretending to work while stealing glances at him, whispering behind computer screens. A photograph on the wall caught his attention, the company's founder, Gerald Meridian, shaking hands with the previous CEO. Both wore near-identical suits, identical smiles. Jack had met Gerald only once, 6 months before the founder's death, when the old man had approached him privately about acquiring his company. "My executives are sharks in designer suits," Gerald had told him over a simple dinner in a quiet restaurant. They know how to dress for success, but they've forgotten what success actually means. Gerald had seen something in Jack, not just business acumen, but something deeper. A humanity that the company had lost. Jack's expression darkened momentarily as he remembered their conversation, then softened as he recalled his promise to the dying man. The elevator ride was excruciating. As Jack stepped inside, two executives in matching charcoal suits shifted away slightly, creating a bubble of space around him. The woman wrinkled her nose discreetly while tapping on her phone. The man straightened his already impeccable tie, avoiding eye contact. Jack recognized them from his research. Marketing VP Alicia Thornton and Sales Director Derek Wells. Both had impressive resumes and terrible employee satisfaction ratings. Floor? Derek asked without looking at Jack. 5, please, Jack replied quietly. The executives exchanged glances. Boardroom level, Alicia commented, raising a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Janitorial services? Jack merely nodded, studying his reflection in the elevator's polished metal wall. The face that looked back at him was tired but determined. Eyes that had seen failure and success in equal measure. The elevator announced the 5th floor with a gentle chime. As the doors opened, Jack stepped out first, feeling their curious stares burning into his back as he walked toward the boardroom where his name was already being engraved on the CEO's chair. Wrong building, buddy, a suited man called out as Jack passed by an open office door. The comment drew snickers from nearby cubicles. Jack paused, turning slowly to face the man. Bernard Hayes, according to the nameplate, head of acquisitions. Jack had reviewed his file just yesterday. Aggressive tactics, 3 harassment complaints quietly settled. The boardroom? Jack asked simply, ignoring the jibe. Bernard's smile faltered slightly at Jack's direct question. End of the hall, but there's an executive meeting today. No maintenance allowed. He emphasized the last words loudly enough for surrounding colleagues to hear, drawing more poorly concealed laughter. Jack nodded his thanks and continued walking. He'd faced worse than petty office politics. Much worse. The year he launched his first company, he'd pitched to 57 investors before getting his first yes. He'd been laughed out of fancier rooms than this. The difference was, back then he actually had something to prove. Today, he already owned the building these people thought he didn't belong in. The irony wasn't lost on him as he followed the signs to the boardroom. The company cafeteria buzzed with morning energy as employees grabbed coffee before starting their day. Jack stood in line, wallet in hand, counting out exact change for the cheapest coffee option. Behind him, conversations continued with occasional glances his way. Only one person showed him any kindness, a young intern who noticed him struggling with the unfamiliar coffee machine. Here, let me help, she offered, reaching over to press the correct button. Her name tag read Maya, summer intern. Thank you, Jack said quietly. Maya smiled genuinely before returning to her colleagues. At a nearby table, 3 middle-aged women in designer outfits watched the interaction with obvious disapproval. Probably another delivery guy who got lost, one whispered loudly. He smells like a thrift store, another added with a sneer. Don't encourage them, Maya. Jack sipped his coffee silently, observing the dynamics. Maya looked uncomfortable but said nothing more to him. The coffee was terrible. Nothing like the simple brew he made each morning in his modest apartment, despite having billions in offshore accounts. Some luxuries, Jack had learned, weren't luxuries at all. An electronic chime sounded through the office as an email notification appeared simultaneously on dozens of screens. Mandatory all-staff meeting, 12 p.m. today. Introduction of new CEO. The message sent a visible ripple of activity across the open floor plan. Jack, sitting quietly in a corner of the common area with his coffee, watched the transformation with fascination. Suddenly, mirrors appeared from purses. Ties were straightened. Lipstick reapplied. I heard he's from Goldman Sachs. One young analyst whispered excitedly to his colleague. My friend in HR says he's some tech genius from Silicon Valley. Another countered. A manager walking by added importantly, Board said he's turned around 3 major companies. Harvard MBA. My kind of leader. Jack suppressed a smile. He had indeed turned around companies, but he'd never finished college. The board knew this, of course. The 7 men and women who had secretly met with him over the past months, sworn to confidentiality by Gerald Meridian's final wishes. As employees hurried to make themselves presentable for the mystery CEO, Jack checked his watch. 3 more hours of anonymity. Jack moved through the hallways like a ghost, clipboard in hand as if on official business. No one questioned him, a trick he'd learned long ago. Act like you belong and people rarely challenge you. He observed everything, the efficiency of work patterns, the interactions between departments, the body language that revealed the real power structures. In one department, employees fell silent when a particular manager walked by. In another, 2 team members were clearly doing the work of 5. Jack made mental notes about everything. Outside the HR department, a young woman was crying quietly in a corner, while her supervisor loudly criticized her work within earshot of everyone. The supervisor's nameplate read, Catherine Mills, HR Director. Another name on Jack's extensive research list. Catherine caught him watching and frowned. Do you need something? She asked sharply. Jack shook his head and continued walking. These were the details no consultant report could capture, the toxic culture points that financial statements couldn't reveal. This was why Gerald Meridian had reached out to Jack in the first place. They've forgotten people matter, the old man had said. Jack was beginning to see exactly what he meant. As Jack waited for the elevator to return to the lobby for a moment of quiet reflection, memories washed over him like a sudden rainstorm. 15 years ago, he'd been sleeping in his car, showering at a gym where he cleaned floors to afford the membership. His first company was a simple app developed in public libraries where he could use the computers for free. 3 years of rejection of worn clothes and missed meals. 3 years before the first acquisition offer came. He remembered the day he'd sold that first company, standing outside the attorney's office in his only suit, bought second-hand, staring at a check with more zeros than he'd ever seen. He hadn't celebrated. Instead, he'd walked 10 miles to save bus fare, gone back to his tiny apartment, and started planning his next company. 5 more successes had followed. 5 companies built from nothing, sold for millions, then billions. Jack never changed his lifestyle much, no mansions, no sports cars. His wealth went back into creating jobs, into new ventures. The elevator arrived empty this time. Inside, Jack allowed himself a rare moment of emotion, touching the worn photo in his wallet, his mother who'd never seen his success, who'd worked 3 jobs to raise him alone. On the executive floor again, Jack passed an office with an open door. Inside, a maintenance worker was carefully installing a new nameplate. Only the first name was visible so far, Jack. The maintenance worker looked up as Jack paused in the doorway. New boss coming today, the man explained with a friendly smile. Fancy office, huh? Must be important. Jack nodded, looking around at the spacious corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Seems nice, he agreed quietly. The worker continued mounting the nameplate, adding the last name now, Wilson. Jack Wilson, the worker read aloud. Sounds like a regular guy, doesn't he? Not like some of these fancy types with 3 names and a number at the end. He laughed at his own joke. Jack smiled genuinely for the first time that day. I hope he is a regular guy, he replied. The maintenance worker nodded approvingly, never suspecting he was speaking to the very man whose name he was installing. As Jack continued down the hall, he wondered how many other invisible conversations like this one had happened throughout his career. People speaking freely because they never imagined he could be someone who mattered. In the corridor outside the finance department, Jack nearly collided with a hurried executive studying papers as he walked. The man looked up, irritated at first, then curious. Jack recognized him immediately. Michael Chun, Chief Financial Officer, one of the few executives Gerald Meridian had spoken highly of. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Jack's face. "Excuse me," he said, more carefully than the others had spoken to Jack all day. "Have we met before?" Jack maintained his neutral expression. "I don't believe so, sir," he answered politely. Michael frowned, clearly trying to place Jack's face. "You remind me of someone. A photograph, perhaps?" Jack knew exactly which photograph. A small black and white image in a financial magazine 5 years ago, blurry and distant, capturing him leaving a courthouse after his 4th company acquisition. The only public image of him that existed. Michael shook his head finally. "My mistake. Carry on." He continued down the hallway but glanced back once, still puzzled. Jack made a mental note. Michael Chen was observant. That could be valuable in what was coming next. Or dangerous. By 11:30, the company messaging system was on fire with speculation and gossip. Jack, sitting quietly in a corner of the lobby, watched as employees checked their phones constantly, smirking and laughing. A notification on a nearby screen caught his attention. Someone had shared his photo in the company chat group. The caption read, "Can't wait to see who the new boss is." Face with tears of joy. Definitely not this clown who's been wandering around all morning. The image showed Jack sitting in the cafeteria, looking tired, a coffee cup in his hand. Someone had added cartoon clown emojis around his head. The comments below were worse. Maybe he's applying to be the company mascot. Probably homeless and looking for the shelter. Security should check his bag before he steals something. Jack felt a familiar burning in his chest, not anger exactly, but determination. During his hardest years, he promised himself that if he ever succeeded, he would never become like the people who had judged him, dismissed him, made him feel worthless. Now, watching the casual cruelty unfold on screens throughout the office, he recognized the culture of contempt that had infected the company Gerald Meridian had built with such different values. At precisely noon, employees streamed toward the large conference center on the 3rd floor. Jack joined the flow, anonymous among the excited crowd. The atmosphere hummed with anticipation. This was the biggest company announcement in years. Inside the auditorium, rows of chairs faced a small stage with a podium. Executive leadership sat in a reserved front row, backs straight, expressions confident. Jack slipped into a seat in the back corner, watching as people filed in, chatting excitedly. "I heard he's British royalty or something," one young employee whispered. "My money's on that guy from Apple," another replied. The board members entered last, solemn-faced, taking seats on the stage. The CFO, Michael Chen, glanced around the room, his eyes pausing briefly on Jack before moving on. The room gradually fell silent as everyone waited for the introduction of their new leader. 1 minute passed. 2. The tension grew palpable. No one appeared at the podium. The board chairman checked his watch, frowning slightly. A murmur of confusion rippled through the audience. Jack took a deep breath and stood up. Every head turned as Jack made his way down the center aisle toward the empty stage. Confusion painted across faces as the shabbily dressed man they'd been mocking all morning walked purposefully toward the podium. Security guards exchanged uncertain glances, hands moving toward their radios. The board chairman stood, recognition dawning on his face. He alone among the leadership had met Jack in person before today. A gasp from the front row as Michael Chen suddenly connected the face to that distant memory of a photograph. Jack climbed the steps to the stage without hurry, his worn shoes quiet against the polished wood. At the podium, he placed his leather portfolio down carefully and looked out at the sea of stunned faces. The silence in the room was absolute. In the front row, the executives who had sneered at him in the elevator sat frozen, recognition and horror dawning simultaneously on their faces. Jack didn't speak immediately. Instead, he simply stood there, allowing the moment to stretch, letting the realization spread through the room like a slow-moving wave. When he finally reached for the microphone, the small movement seemed to echo through the silent auditorium. "My name is Jack Wilson," he began, his voice quiet but carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, I own 51% of Meridian Enterprises. I am your new CEO." He opened his worn portfolio and removed a single sheet of paper. Without preamble or explanation, he began reading names and departments. Marketing Department, Alicia Thornton. He paused, looking directly at the woman who had wrinkled her nose at him in the elevator. Human Resources, Catherine Mills, the supervisor who had publicly humiliated her employee. Acquisitions, Bernard Hayes, the man who had loudly proclaimed Jack was in the wrong building. Name after name, department after department. No explanation. Just a steady recitation from his list. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others sat perfectly still as if movement might draw attention to them. The board members watched impassively. They'd been briefed on what was coming. The paper in Jack's hands represented months of careful research, employee surveys, exit interviews, performance reviews, and personal observations from Gerald Meridian himself. Every name on that list had contributed to the toxic culture that was destroying the company from within. A woman in the third row stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here dressed like..." Jack raised one hand, not even looking in her direction. The gesture was calm, almost gentle, but carried such natural authority that she fell silent immediately. The room seemed to hold its breath. Jack continued reading names as if there had been no interruption. When he finished, he finally looked up, making eye contact with various people around the room whose names he had read. "Those I've named represent the top 20% of salary earners at this company," he said evenly. "You also represent the bottom 20% in our anonymous employee satisfaction surveys." A murmur ran through the crowd. Jack waited for it to subside. Gerald Meridian built this company on 3 principles: innovation, integrity, and respect for every individual who works here. Somewhere along the way, 2 of those principles were forgotten. He looked directly at Bernard Hayes. "Would you say you showed respect to the maintenance staff this morning, Mr. Hayes?" Bernard's face flushed deep, red as nearby colleagues inched away from him. "The names I just read," Jack continued, his voice still remarkably calm, "are people who will meet with me individually over the next 2 weeks. Some of you will be offered the opportunity to realign with the company's founding values. Others will be offered generous severance packages." He paused, allowing the words to sink in. "You're dismissed for today. Please check your email for your appointment time." No shouting, no dramatic firing scene, just quiet, controlled consequences. Several of the named executives sat frozen in disbelief. Others stood quickly, faces flushed with anger or embarrassment, and hurried toward the exits. As they filed out, Jack turned his attention to the remaining employees. "For everyone else, I have a different message." The tension in the room shifted as hundreds of people who had expected to be invisible to the new CEO suddenly found themselves the focus of his attention. Many had participated in the mockery via text or whispered comments. They shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but Jack's expression softened slightly. "This isn't about punishment. It's about rebuilding the culture that once made this company great. I came to you today as I am, Jack said, gesturing to his worn suit, because I wanted to see this company as it truly is, not the polished version prepared for a new CEO's arrival. He moved away from the podium, standing at the edge of the stage. 15 years ago, I was homeless, developing my first app on library computers. My clothes weren't torn because it was fashionable, they were torn because they were all I had. A hush fell over the room as personal connection replaced the earlier shock. What I discovered then is what I rediscovered today. People judge worth by appearance. They measure value in designer labels and expensive accessories. His eyes found Maya, the intern who had helped him with the coffee machine. With rare exceptions, she blushed as nearby colleagues glanced at her curiously. But true worth isn't found in how we treat those we think are important. It's revealed in how we treat those we believe can't help or hurt us. He let that sink in for a moment. Gerald Meridian knew that. He built this company treating the custodian with the same respect he showed to clients. Somewhere along the way, that vision was lost. 2 weeks later, Meridian Enterprises was a different company. 14 executives had been replaced. The open office floor buzzed with new energy as Jack, still in simple but now intact clothing, walked through, greeting employees by name. The new company policies were simple. Hiring would prioritize character alongside competence. Toxic behavior would result in immediate consequences regardless of position. And every quarter, executives would spend 1 week working in entry-level positions. The lesson isn't that you should be nice to strangers because they might secretly be billionaires, Jack had explained in his first company-wide email. You should be decent to everyone because that's who we are as a company and that's who you should be as a person. By the water cooler, Maya, now promoted to leadership development, was explaining the new mentorship program to recent hires. As Jack passed by, employees smiled genuinely, not with the fear or forced deference they'd shown the previous leadership, but with authentic respect. Outside his office, a simple nameplate read just Jack. The maintenance worker who had installed it gave him a thumbs up through the glass. Jack Wilson returned the gesture, then turned back to the business of rebuilding a company where everyone belonged. If this story resonated with you, please like the video and subscribe for more powerful life lessons. Share with someone who needs to hear this message today. What moment touched you most? Did you ever judge someone who turned out to be more than they appeared? Comment below with your experiences. Your story might help someone else see beyond appearances.